to leave at this moment.
Since you're leaving in an uncomfortable way, I want the keys to my house.
Yeah, they're right there.
And the storage.
Right there.
Nobody else has keys, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. No one else has keys.
Tyler, genuinely, if you've been here, genuinely to help, I appreciate it. The lies are a lot. And especially if you are genuine and trying to help in your own way, you should be very concerned if they recognize you, because anyone else, like running for district, it doesn't add up. I'm not threatening you, but I'm saying, like, I'm not threatening you at all. I'm trying to help as a friend because I feel like it has to be bipolar or something. Like, I don't think you're grasping the level of online things that don't make sense.
No, I understand where you're coming from. At this moment, I would like to leave. And I'm more than receptive if you want to call or text me.
How do I send you the money of the receipts?
I'm not concerned about any of that. But I'm still very receptive.
She looked into the camera and said she wanted her keys back. Not her daughter, her keys. That is the sentence that should stop you, because by the moment she said it, Melody Buzzard had already been gone for weeks, and the mother who reported nothing, who searched for nothing, was instead negotiating the return of house keys from a man she had accused on the record of holding her captive. Sit with that for a moment. We will come back to it. First, we need to understand how a 9-year-old girl vanished so completely that even the photograph used to find her was 2 years out of date. This is the Silent Objection, and this is the case of Melody Elani Buzzard.
We're learning more about a 9-year-old Lompoc girl who has not been seen for at least a year.
An ongoing desperate search in Santa Barbara County for a 9-year-old girl.
Additional search warrants have been served in the search for missing 9-year-old Santa Barbara County girl.
Her name is Melody Buzzard.
Melody Buzzard.
Melody Buzzard.
The timeline begins on October 7th in the quiet town of Lompoc, California. A mother and daughter leave home for what is described, in official reports, as a 3-day trip to Nebraska. No goodbyes to extended family, no unusual mention to neighbors, just a departure, logged like any other errand. What makes this moment worth pausing on is not the trip itself, but what a rental car surveillance camera captured that same day. Both mother and daughter wearing wigs, not costumes for a party, not a joke caught on tape, a disguise, worn at the exact moment they climbed into a rented white sedan and drove out of frame.
Surveillance footage retrieved from a local rental agency captures the pair standing at the counter that same day. And here's where the narrative takes a sharp turn. Curiously, both appear to be donning wigs. They roll off the lot.
3 days later, the mother returns, alone. The rental contract is closed out on schedule, as if the trip had gone exactly to plan, except for one detail the paperwork cannot explain. There is no Melody. For a week, nothing happens. No search, no call to police. The silence is broken not by a parent's fear, but by a school administrator following a checklist. Melody had recently been moved into a home study program that required submitted coursework to verify she was actually being educated. She submitted nothing. When the school's standard follow-up calls and visits went unanswered, they did what protocol required. They notified law enforcement. That is worth sitting with. The alarm that ultimately saved this case from becoming a cold file forever was not sounded by a mother. It was sounded by a truancy officer.
The alarm bells finally rang on October 14th, not from a mother's frantic 911 call, but because the school administrator was simply following protocol. After years of private homeschooling, Ashley had enrolled Melody in the district's independent home study program back in August. Crucially, this program requires submitted work to verify attendance. Melody never turned in a single page. When
deputies conducted a welfare check at the family home, Melody was not there. And when investigators asked her mother, Ashley Buzzard, where her daughter currently was, she could not answer the question. Not with hesitation, not with an evasive redirection. She simply had no verifiable location to give them. Investigators soon discovered something more troubling still. Outside of her mother's presence, no independent adult appeared to have seen or interacted with Melody in close to a year. Here is where the case stops being a missing persons report and starts being something else entirely.
That the authorities had to circulate was already 2 years out of date. With probable cause mounting, the investigation shifted gears. Police executed search warrants on the Buzzard home on October 15th and again on the 30th. They tossed a storage unit and processed that white Chevy Malibu for forensic trace evidence. Each search added pieces to the puzzle.
Searches were executed on the family home, a storage unit, and the rental vehicle. Forensic teams processed each site for trace evidence. What they found, piece by piece, was not the location of a missing child. It was the outline of a plan. Investigators would later determine that somewhere along the route, the rental car's California plate had been swapped for a New York tag, a maneuver with one clear purpose in the world of criminal investigation: defeating traffic cameras and complicating any reconstruction of the route.
Investigators allege that somewhere along the line, Ashley switched the rental car's California license plate with a New York tag. Now, police can't pinpoint exactly when or where the swap happened, or if she cycled through other plates, but the intent is clear. In the world of criminal investigation, plate swapping is a classic counter-surveillance tactic, a deliberate move to confuse traffic cameras and mess with route reconstruction.
And this is where you should ask yourself a question this channel poses often. When does caution stop looking like fear and start looking like tradecraft? Surveillance near the Colorado-Utah border captured Melody alive on October 9th. According to investigators, it is the last confirmed sighting of her on any camera, anywhere. After that frame, the data goes dark. Cell tower pings and vehicle telemetry suggest the mother's route changed abruptly, cutting back west through some of the most sparsely populated terrain in the American Southwest, stretches of desert where the absence of witnesses is not incidental. It is structural.
Relying on cell tower pings and vehicle telemetry, investigators believe Ashley abruptly altered her course, hooking back west. The estimated route is a tour of desolation, passing through Green River and Panguitch in Utah, cutting through the emptiness of northwest Arizona, crossing into Nevada near Primm, and finally slipping back into California through Rancho Cucamonga.
Throughout this stretch, one detail from the paternal side of the family deserves attention because it reframes everything that follows. Melody's father died in a motorcycle accident when she was 6 months old, leaving her mother with sole custody. According to relatives who later spoke publicly, that is also when contact with the paternal family began to narrow, then disappear altogether. Attempts at court-ordered visitation, they say, were repeatedly blocked. Whether or not a court ever ruled on those claims, the pattern being described is the same pattern investigators would eventually find themselves documenting on a much larger scale: isolation, first of a family, then of a child, then of the truth itself.
But when you look at the family history, that's where the picture starts to form, and it is tragic. Melody's father, Rubiel Meza, was employed at Pacific Petroleum and Speed Trucking and was also a volunteer firefighter. Tragically, he died in a motorcycle crash when Melody was just 6 months old. That left Ashley with sole custody. And, according to the dad's side of the family, that's exactly when the isolation started. Melody's aunt, Vicky Shade, didn't hold back when she talked to the LA Times. She claimed Ashley was mentally unstable and basically walled Melody off from her father's relatives.
That is the halfway point of this story, and it is worth pausing to say plainly, everything up to now has been about a child no one could locate. What comes next is about a mother who did something almost no parent under this kind of scrutiny would do. She let the case get more complicated on purpose. Nearly a month after Melody's disappearance, the investigation took an unexpected detour. Ashley Buzzard was arrested, not in connection with her daughter, but on a charge of false imprisonment, filed after a man named Tyler Brewer told police she had held him against his will inside her home, allegedly with a box cutter. Brewer described a bizarre account she had given him, that she had left Melody with a couple she'd met at a zoo, a couple whose names, addresses, and phone numbers she claimed not to actually know.
According to published reports, a man named Tyler Brewer contacted authorities claiming he had been held hostage inside Ashley Buzzard's home. Brewer, who identifies as a paralegal on social media, told a Santa Barbara news station that he's known Ashley since 2014, but has had little contact with her over the past few years. He reached out to Ashley after the news broke, offering his assistance. According to a statement to police, Brewer visited the Mars Avenue home multiple times between November 1st and November 6th, but he alleged that the final visit turned confrontational. He claimed the interaction escalated until Ashley brandished a box cutter.
Ask yourself, calmly, the way this channel always asks, what kind of parent hands a child to strangers she cannot identify and then cannot explain how she would ever get that child back? Despite the seriousness of the accusation and the surrounding suspicion, the court released her on electronic monitoring pending a preliminary hearing. Here is your open loop. A woman under investigation for the disappearance of her own daughter, now facing a separate criminal charge, walks out of a courtroom wearing an ankle monitor instead of handcuffs. What happens at that preliminary hearing will determine whether this entire secondary case collapses, and whether it drags focus away from the search for Melody at the worst possible moment. Then, on December 6th, the case broke.
It was just heartbreaking and devastating for the whole family.
For more than 2 months, Melody Buzzard's family waited, hoping for a different outcome after the 9-year-old disappeared from the Vandenberg Village area in October. On Tuesday, investigators confirmed she was found shot in the head and killed in a rural area of Canesville, Utah. Authorities say Melody's body was discovered December 6th after a man and woman stopped along.
A man and woman traveling a remote stretch of road in Wayne County, Utah, made a call to authorities. What they found ended a 2-month search in the worst possible way. Investigators confirmed that the remains recovered were Melody Buzzard. She had been shot. The FBI crime lab fast-tracked DNA confirmation, but the forensic significance of that scene went further than identification. A bullet was recovered from her remains. When compared against the shell casing found inside her mother's home in California, it matched. That single ballistic comparison did something no amount of erratic behavior, no wig, no swapped license plate, and no recorded conversation about house keys could do on its own. It connected a weapon that had been in Ashley Buzzard's possession in Lompoc to the death of her daughter in the Utah desert. Everything prior to that match was suspicion, however overwhelming. That match was proof.
The FBI crime lab fast-tracked the DNA testing, confirming the worst. The remains belonged to Melody. But the autopsy provided more than just identification. It provided the link. Investigators recovered a bullet from the remains. When the lab compared it to the shell casing found inside Ashley's home in Lompoc, it was a match. This was the forensic glue the prosecution needed, proving that the weapon used to end Melody's life in the Utah desert had been in Ashley's possession back in California.
Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown addressed the public shortly after, describing the case as involving what he called cold-blooded and criminally sophisticated planning. At approximately 7:51 that morning, Ashley Lynn Buzzard was arrested by the sheriff's office and the FBI for the murder of her daughter. Let that stand on its own for a moment. No embellishment is required. At arraignment in late December, she appeared without the disguises captured on that rental car footage weeks earlier. Simply herself, entering a plea of not guilty to a felony complaint of first-degree murder, with a special circumstance allegation attached.
When Ashley Buzzard walked back into court in late December, she looked different. The wigs and disguises we saw in that rental car surveillance? Gone. She stood there in her natural hair, looking like a completely different person from the one on those tapes.
You're charged in a felony complaint with first-degree murder with a special allegation pursuant to 190.2A15. Mr. Galvan, do you wish to waive further reading and advisement?
So
And are you requesting that I enter not guilty plea in denial?
we're entering a not guilty plea.
Oh, okay. Not guilty plea is...
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen.
The district attorney's office subsequently announced it would not pursue the death penalty, instead seeking a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. She remains in custody without bail, with the case proceeding toward a preliminary hearing. Here is the lesson this case leaves behind, and it is one you can actually use, whether you ever sit on a jury, watch a trial, or simply try to make sense of the news. A missing persons case and a homicide case are not always separated by new information. Sometimes they are separated only by which piece of evidence the state chooses to introduce first. For weeks, this was a search. A single ballistic match turned it into a prosecution. Watch what a case is built on before you decide what kind of case it is. The framing you are given first is rarely the framing that ends up being true. There was no shouting in that courtroom when the recording played. There was no dramatic collapse. There was only a woman, calm and composed, asking for her keys back, and a room full of people who understood in that quiet moment that the search for a missing child had just become something else entirely. That is the record. No one needed to raise their voice.